Yeah.
Damn it.
You got me.
He's too good.
He's got practice.
Got practice. I'm a
Is that
master.
how you start? Like on the start with Thumb Wars, and you work up from there.
Yeah. If competitive throwing was a sport.
You got like thousands of people. Like, oh!
Like you're in the Olympics.
And you got like a camera like watching this.
Like dramatically following it. It's like a documentary on it.
Okay, we are here. So will you please put your phones away?
Why? What phone?
I thought we were done with this.
We didn't quite finish the third one.
Did we not?
We didn't?
I don't think we.
Oh, yeah, we didn't even get to it.
I don't think we addressed the third one.
No.
Okay.
Moving.
We
did.
began
We
talking
voted.
about it, but I don't think we finished.
We voted, but then we didn't like find out.
You didn't find out. Okay, so that's where we're at. So just as a reminder, the Japanese general who was the mastermind of the Bataan Death March was captured, put on trial, but the trial took place after the war was already over. So in essence, what one side was arguing was it doesn't matter when the trial is, since the crimes were committed during the war, it should be a war trial, and as a result, it should be a tribunal situation. But then the other group said, no, if civilian courts are open, then they have to be the first choice. Military trials only can occur when there are no civilian trials. That's where we left off. Okay. So, two questions for you. One is, what would you say should be done? How many of you think the Japanese general who engaged in those war crimes should be held accountable in a war crimes trial? I believe it should be a war crime. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. How many of you say, nope, civilian trial, war's over?
Well,
this doesn't add up.
because they're not listening.
It cannot be 10-0. Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Trial. That's what happened. Or do you think, Potter's tricking us? How many of you think it was a civilian trial? We got to vote for a civilian trial. All right. Just to see. Yeah, right. You might be right. All right. Well, let's see what happens here. So this is the third one. So we've done this one. We've done that one. And now the new one. Sorry, we're wrong. Military, right? It doesn't matter if the war is over. They were still war crimes, and as such, military trials were the appropriate way to go. Okay, I do have a few. We're going to skip this for now. I want to define the difference between criminal and prisoner of war. Right? Think about when the Americans landed on the beaches of Normandy. Why didn't they arrest all those Germans? Weren't they killing Americans? Isn't murder illegal? Weren't those Germans breaking American law? That's an interesting argument. The Germans were engaging in self-defense. So that means the Americans were breaking the law.
Yeah.
The international.
Okay, very good, Kaylee. Not during a war. During a war, it's understood that there are acts that are violent, and it's not like they're applauded, but they're not illegal. The Germans were not arrested. Regular German soldiers were not arrested after World War II and held accountable for every American that you killed. It's war. That's what happens. Now, that does not mean that you can do anything. There are rules of warfare, war crimes. The Japanese general is an example. He went above and beyond acceptable behavior during a war. So we're gonna differentiate between something called a criminal, right? You arrest someone, they are now in your control, and you say you broke a law, you are a criminal. And a POW, a prisoner of war. We've also captured you, but you're not a criminal. You're a POW, you're a prisoner of war. And then the dilemma of 9/11. So definition, again, this is all available on the website if you want to learn. So who are POWs? Soldiers captured in wartime. Okay. The problem though is where it gets murky is after 9/11. So 9/11 occurs, and the U.S. figures out, all right, we know it's these people from this thing called Al-Qaeda. They are non-state soldiers. Anyone know what I mean by that? Non-state soldiers.
That's sponsored by a recognized country.
Very good. They are soldiers. There's no doubt about it. But they are not fighting for a country, right? Those German soldiers were fighting for Germany. The U.S. acknowledges it. They still tried to kill them. They still tried to capture them. But they were, in a way, justified in their behavior. They were not violating the rules of war. But what about 9/11? There is no Al-Qaedaville. There's no Al-Qaeda-istan. So the U.S. figures out who did it, where they are. They figure out they're in Afghanistan, goes in, captures a bunch of them. What do you do with them? Are they prisoners of war? Are they soldiers?
They kill them good.
Well, the answer is, well, no. Well, then if they're not prisoners of war, that makes them criminals, right? If you're not a POW, you're a criminal. They're criminals? Okay, well, let's see. So if we make them criminals, that means that they have the rights of the accused. Do you know your Miranda rights? Very good. You have the right to an attorney. Oh, someone who's well-versed. Say, I have questions. All right. Right? You all have the rights of the accused. You have, when the police arrest you and sit you down, basically what they're telling you before they ask you any questions is, we're about to ask you a bunch of questions. You shouldn't answer us. Do not answer us. You have the right to remain silent. Now, where is he? My bad, man. Only that's not what they did with these people. They did not call these people that engaged in 9/11 criminals because they didn't want these people to have the right to remain silent. They wanted answers. And so they engaged in aggressive interrogation techniques, including waterboarding, including making them stand on those little boxes with wires attached to all sorts of interesting places. And they engaged in, we'll agree, aggressive interrogation techniques. Now, whether that's torture or not, that's up to you to decide. So they're not POWs, but they're not criminals either. We don't want them to be POWs because if they're POWs, then they're engaging in acts of war. But we don't want them to be criminals either because if they're criminals, then that means they have Miranda rights. We don't want either. So what to do, what to do, what to do? Who are these people? Before I show you, does anyone know? Does anyone know the invention of a new thing that the U.S. invented after 9/11 to deal with people that aren't soldiers, and as a result, they're not POWs, but they're not criminals either? You're close. Anyone know the term? I'll give you the letters. Maybe it'll spring something. It's EC. These people are EC.
Something combatant.
Good. What?
Extranational?
What's wrong with you?
I don't know.
Okay.
Enemy
combatants. Now, this is important. This is important on a legal sense. Does anyone know the document that dictates how you treat prisoners of war? The United States signed it. It is a treaty. The United States agreed to sign it. Yep. If we are ever in a war and we capture POWs, here are the guidelines for how you can treat them. What's that called? Very good. It's called the Geneva Conventions. It was signed after World War II. It dictates how you treat prisoners of war. Does anyone know that? So we have this document that dictates how you can treat prisoners of war. Does anyone know the name of the document? And you all better know the name of this document. The name of the document that dictates how you treat people accused of crimes. What's that rather important document called? Very good. The U.S. Constitution, specifically the Bill of Rights. Right? You have Third Amendment rights and Fourth Amendment rights and Fifth Amendment rights. Right? What if the police ask you questions you don't have to answer? According to what amendment? What do you plead?
The Fifth. I
plead the Fifth. Right? What is it? He holds up and it says FIF. I plead the Fifth. That comedian, he's hilarious.
But what if you're like so good?
He doesn't do shows anymore, but he used to. Like 10 years ago on Comedy Central. He's really funny. And then he went psycho and went to South Africa.
What if you're so good that you can
Skinny little black guy. What? Chappelle, the Chappelle Show. My God. Have any of you ever seen his Prince impersonation?
No.
Okay, not now. But when you have time, YouTube, Dave Chappelle Prince. It'll change your life. Funniest. Okay. So we don't want them to be POWs because this annoying document called the Geneva Conventions kicks in. We don't want them to be criminals because this annoying thing called the Constitution kicks in. Let's just call them a new thing. Now you tell me legally what I can or can't do with these people.
I don't know.
Do you understand the brilliance of this? We create a new thing. The Geneva Conventions do not apply. The U.S. Constitution does not apply. And now, waterboard. And when people say, hey, you can't waterboard these people, my response to you is, well, why not? Why can't I waterboard these people? You show me where it says I cannot waterboard enemy combatants. Yeah. Now, you are in one of two populations right now. You are thinking that's brilliant. Or that's wrong. You can't just invent a new thing.
What if it's both?
Oh,
Yeah.
But you can't.
You can.
When you're pulled over by the police, you can't say, oh, don't worry, officer. I've got a veto. And you write the word veto on a piece of paper, and the cop doesn't look at it and say, oh, all right. My bad. You have a veto. Right? You can't just make up the rules as you go.
Who says that?
Society, damn it.
But why is society have to rule over us?
POWs, nope. Criminals, nope, they're neither. And as a result, they are subject to enhanced interrogation techniques. We call it waterboarding.
Otherwise, torture.
But they don't apply. No, it's not torture. And we can put them under a unique criminal justice system. We can recreate a new type of court. We can make up the rules. We can say, well, we're going to assume you did it. You had to prove you didn't do it. And you might say, but that violates the Constitution. What Constitution? The Constitution applies to criminals. You're not a criminal. You are an enemy combatant. Now, as soon as you find the words enemy combatant in the Constitution, okay. Brilliant. And then they say, but that's not fair. It violates the Geneva Accords. Really? You show me where it says you cannot waterboard enemy combatants in the Geneva Accords. And they'll be like Elf when he says to Santa, really? Well, if you're Santa, what song did I sing to you for your birthday? Well, happy birthday, of course. Right there. That little face is what these people do. Ha ha. Yes.
Have people ever tried to pass like an amendment to the Constitution to involve enemy combatants yet?
No. But what has happened is that people, including many Americans, looked at the government decision here and said, that's stupid. You can't do this. You can't just invent a term to create a new group of people. Right? So, but again, either way, you can either look at this and say it is a reasonable conclusion because these people aren't soldiers, but they're not criminals either. Or you could look and say, you can't just do that because here's the biggest argument. If you can do it, they can. So as they're sawing off heads, and the Americans say, my God, you can't do that. They could say, yeah, we can. See, this guy's a schmoofa. And it clearly says on this piece of paper that I just wrote that you could cut off heads of schmoofas. And does the United States say, oh yeah. Well, there's nothing we can do. Sorry, Bill. You're a shupa. What were you thinking being a shupa? Hey, if we can invent the rules, so can they. Last slide that I'm going to show you is that because of this decision to create this new thing called enemy combatants, trials began in 2012, so they're 6 years old now. Trials of these people have been going on at a location. I kind of skipped over that part. That's rather important. The people that were caught in Afghanistan were flown to Cuba. Does anyone know why they were flown to Cuba?
Guantanamo Bay.
That's right, a U.S. naval base called Guantanamo Bay. Had they set foot on American soil, the concern was the Constitution would automatically engage, right? Once you're on American soil, there's this important document called the Constitution that applies. You're not in American soil, you're in Cuba. The Constitution doesn't apply to Cuba. So waterboard and put them on trial in a military trial situation. Now, before you think, well, they were all found guilty, that's actually not true. Many people that were flown to Guantanamo Bay it was kind of discovered that they really had nothing to do with it. They were just an Afghan shepherd, and the U.S. military arrested them because they happened to be in an area, and it was all a mistake. Sorry
for 6 years in prison.
Sorry, right? But I mean, think about this. These people, some of them were flown to Guantanamo Bay in 2001. They're still there. It's 2019. That's 18 years of being held without a trial and not being accused of anything. 18 years. And they're still there waiting. Waiting for the U.S. to decide what do we do with these people. So what we're going to do in the near future is figure out what did Obama and what is Trump doing with many of these people. Because at its height, it had over 1,000 prisoners. Today, I think that number is like 60. There are only like 60 left. What happened to these people? Where'd they go?
Let them go.
So where they? Okay. Any questions on this?
Well, Obama said he was going to close Guantanamo.
Give me a sec.
Like that was one of his party promises in 2008. That didn't happen, and he never closed it.
Today's a 2 mod, so we're out of here at 10 after. Keep that
Why?
Why? Thursdays
Why can't we have like 5 mod classes?
Anyway, I'm going to ask you at your table, and if you have an extraordinarily small table, feel free to join another table. Okay, you should have at least 4 people at your table to make this worthwhile. So maybe this group join that group or something. Okay. So I'm going to ask you to consider 3 questions and develop quickly, like within the next 3-4 minutes here, please. Develop arguments for both sides of the question. These 3 questions. Okay. Now, in order to understand, I need to inform you of what these things mean, right? Does anyone know what precision bombing is, as opposed to something called area bombing?
Well, precision bomb be like factories of tanks, soldier hideouts, stuff like that.
What's area bombing?
Just anywhere you can where the enemy is.
Very good. So the United States military, for example, during World War II, in Germany, we did precision bombing. In Japan, we did area bombing. In Germany, we tried to destroy the factories. In Japan, we tried to destroy everything. Now, we could debate in this class why. And you could argue, well, we were racist. The Germans are at least fellow white people, and those Japanese are not. Or you could argue it's because of Japanese method of fighting. The absolute refusal to surrender necessitated that barbaric way of fighting. We're not going to go there. What I'm wondering, though, is which is the more effective way of fighting? Which is the better way to go? I mean, by area bombing, aren't you creating future enemies who are very resentful of what you did and they'll get you back?
No.
Or, I mean, is precision bombing even effective? Had we precision bombed Japan, do you think they would have surrendered?
Wow, I mean, technically,
okay, so think about that.
It's only one of them.
And then question number 2, which is sort of a big question and it kind of fits in, and that is this. Is there any such thing as an innocent civilian? Is there any such thing? When the U.S. dropped those bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, were they killing soldiers, future soldiers, teachers of soldiers, doctors of soldiers, makers of weapons that soldiers used, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which would be justifiable killing of civilians, and there's no such thing as an innocent civilian? Or could you argue, no? When the cops come here on a code red and they find out that there's a gunman in here holding this room hostage, they don't go to that guy's house and kill his family. And they say, all right, you better give up now because we know where grandma lives. And the person in here's like, what the hell's wrong with you? Aren't you the cops? Badass cops. Right? That'd be a great show on Fox, wouldn't it? Badass cops.
Kill your family.
Kill your family and then your grandma. All right.
Just hardcore.
Because if there's no such thing as an innocent civilian, that would justify Americans killing civilians and Japanese killing civilians. All right. And then third big question is this. should we have rules of war? Or should war be
No
War!
holds barred.
no holds barred?
Total
Okay.
warfare.
War is war. You don't get to dictate rules.
Can't wait to release some.
Keep this in mind. During the American Revolution, the British had rules. And the Americans said, screw those rules. We're not going by those rules. One of the rules the British had was wear clearly identical clothing so we know where to shoot. And the Americans said, that's stupid. You wear red with a white X. We'll know where to shoot. We'll go with, hiding and stuff. Hiding violated rules of war. Well, if there are rules of war back then, there are rules of war today. Should there be? Okay. So I will give you until the big hand is on the 12th, 5 minutes. Come up with arguments for both sides at your table. Go.
Marching in the columns. Good times.
The simpler days.
Yeah, the good
It's
old
like,
days.
you know how scared shitless you must be if you were a drummer? I mean, maybe you got like a freaking pistol or something, but that's it.
You probably had like a flintlock right next to you.
Yeah, it's probably like a flintlock pistol. We didn't have a freaking musket.
You're locking in every.
I know,
You
but
missed from this far away.
I know. You just gotta march and hide in the
So
middle.
anyway, precision bombing is better
Yeah.
because area bombing has never worked. In the history of mankind,
Ask the Japanese.
your race
never
mine?
worked.
Used a big rice cooker.
That was see, when you're going to like
talking about
area
cooking
bombing has
rice
never
heads?
broken the will of a nation. Never. That's the goal of area bombing is to make the civilians so sick of it they want their nation to stop. It has never worked. It just makes the civilians angrier, which makes them want to fight more.
Yeah.
Because after the Germans bombed the shit out of London and shit, enlistment in the RAF and whatever went like skyrocketed because like these people are fucking pissed, right?
They're destroying their
Precision works because factories.
All of you are
targets
required to take sociology.
harm.
Slows down you
Sign up
down.
for sociology. It's not optional. Take it.
They harm, specific military targets hurt the nation.
Yep.
Area bombers never work. Are there innocent civilians?
I'd say so.
Yeah.
For sure.
I'd say civilians you should try and lessen the casualties of civilians however you can.
No,
Yeah, there are
no. Kill the civilians. They have no more to
It's either
fight.
0 or 100. Either there's no civilian deaths or you nuke a city. Like there's no middle ground. You can't go halfway through this.
Get rid of the
make
civilians
a
so then
decision.
that can cut off their supply to the army.
And
Yeah,
then,
some let's just commit genocide.
Yeah, you kill all their troops. Who's gonna
rules
back
of
them
war
up? They don't
are
have.
just common decency.
Which people continue
Will.
to break.
Well, yeah, I mean, like it's basically
Will.
just to like lessen the suffering.
Will.
What?
World War II. Who did we go to war with? Germany. Not the soldiers, Germany. So we kill everyone.
We didn't.
We didn't
Burn the
Everyone.
fields, just burn everything.
do
Kill
that.
everything.
Yeah, but we didn't.
We didn't do that.
That's
We
like,
should.
The
That's how it
Russians
should
did
have
that.
been done.
it's like with
Who
Germany.
we won?
They're evil.
The Russians did that.
We don't win the war till it's off the map, Will. Should have made that place an ocean.
It's kind of hardcore,
It's
man.
kind of hardcore.
It's kind of not
Down
worth the
Berlin,
money.
Salt the earth, so nothing will ever grow there again. It's like Carthage. It's like that's what the Romans did to Carthage. They burned the city down, knocked down every building, and then they plowed salt into the earth so that nothing would ever grow there ever again.
There's nothing ever grow there.
Nothing today. Today it still doesn't grow there.
Really?
Yeah,
What is it?
there's too much salt in the ground. Plants can't grow.
What is it? Just a desert?
Yeah, it's desert.
Nice.
It used to be like a savanna, now it's a fucking desert.
Yep. That's pretty extreme.
Gotta do what you gotta do.
The Romans were not nice people.
They're pretty freaking hardcore back then.
Oh my God, Will took it.
I took one. I did. Yeah, it was a good time. Are we gonna have that final debate on if America's a good country again?
America good.
We should have made Germany
Or
Carthage.
maybe has America been a good, net positive for the world? Or
Okay, here we go.
Damn,
So-
this class.
I'm opening it up to all three questions because in a way they're the same question. And that is, can you target the otherwise untargetable, right? Area bombing is targeting civilians, which would argue that there's no such thing as innocent civilians, which in a way argues that there shouldn't be rules about whether or not you can kill civilians. That's the same argument. Arguing no, precision bombing's better is arguing you shouldn't target innocent civilians, which means you can make rules about acceptable and not acceptable behavior during a war. Now, before I continue and welcome commentary from you, I'm wondering if any of you can see what I'm doing here.
Hey,
Do any of you see what?
Terrorism.
Okay, stop.
Stop it.
Don't say it out loud.
Stop it.
Don't say it out loud.
Stop trying to catch us.
Sleep. Okay. Arguing one way or the other. You stand, you recognize, you stand, you make your point of basically one side or the other. Can you target civilians? Yes or no? Anyone want to speak? Anyone want to start?
I mean,
I'll start.
Speaking, starting, stand.
Stand up, Ben.
Speaking, starting, stand. Send.
you can either kill them all or don't touch them.
That's
Thank you for summarizing both arguments. But what is your opinion?
He just took my.
Either don't kill the civilians. There's no middle ground because, or if you're going to kill the civilians, kill them all, get rid of them.
What do you think?
Yeah.
No,
Either
no,
make it an
no,
ocean.
no.
Do not kill innocent
Don't
civilians.
kill them. It's more work, more time,
So
more
precision
money.
bombing.
Yeah,
So there are innocent civilians, so we should have rules.
there are strategic standpoints.
Or, but
I'm saying in the history of modern warfare, area bombing has never worked as a valid tactic to take down nations. The Germans tried during World War II, and all they did was make the British angrier at them. Because actually, after they bombed and leveled London, the enlistment in the Royal Military skyrocketed because people were so angry. We did the same thing to Germany and Dresden, and all that did was make people angrier at the Americans, and they're still talking about that today.
What about Nagasaki and Hiroshima?
Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Well, that's a whole different level because those are nuclear bombs.
But did the civilian, the army?
Some people would argue that didn't work, and the Japanese were going to surrender anyway. Some would argue that.
thank you, Will. All right, Lauren. So far, I'm hearing two arguments for precision. There are innocent civilians. We should have rules. Go. Without a doubt, area.
Well, they dropped a single bomb. Just one bomb.
On a huge area.
Yeah, but what if the precise target was Nagasaki?
We're going to agree that Nagasaki and Hiroshima were area.
But what if the precision?
They
was
targeted
that
a
city?
building. They got
Period. New page.
Well, didn't you
beginning
say
of
there
chapter.
were
precision
No.
on the map standpoint.
Dominic is speaking now.
It's like a
wasn't there not
Yeah.
much?
Please, Dominic, be
much
speaking, which means no one else is. Go.
Hiroshima.
Okay.
Precision is probably better because you can get the factories like the food storage stuff, but there are no innocent civilians because it's war. War just kind of goes. But we should have like kind of rules.
Oh, he's getting them. He's getting them.
I think I got a Dominic.
Oh.
I got a Dominic.
You fell in.
I just heard you say
Yes.
there's no such thing as innocent civilians.
9/11.
So those people in 9/11 deserved it.
Ooh.
Terrorists of the
They
U.S.
But it has
were not innocent civilians.
But if they're not
I know
innocent, that means
they were
that they're-
civilians, but they were not innocent civilians.
Brokers.
He got you. He got you good.
Were the people in the plane and in the building innocent civilians? Dominic.
and screaming and start to say survival.
Go ahead.
So in like war situations like this,
I'd call that natural selection.
to the other side. So really, like, if you're innocent on one side, you're guilty on the other side because no one likes you. Like the civilians in the
If you're not fast enough to avoid a bullet, you deserve to live.
Badly, they were Americans who the Al Qaeda people flew into the towers, but then the other Americans thought that they were innocent because they were on their side.
I do. And so I'm just going to bring up how come no one is referencing something that we just covered at the beginning of class? I'm a little disappointed.
Your mom's a little disappointed.
So what it sounds like, maybe you're confused. What it sounds like what you're saying is, yeah, to us, they're the bad guys, and to them, we're the bad guys. You're creating an equivalent between the American point of view and Al-Qaeda's point of view. Really? Is that right? Are you saying that their view is as valid as the American view? They just happen to disagree? Just like the German view during World War II was just as valid as the American view, but we were right because we won. Go ahead.
But they got 6.
Absolutely. Perspective is more important than reality. It doesn't matter what's true. What matters is what you believe is true. Yes. Yes.
No.
There are innocent civilians to us, but like to Al Qaeda, everyone's not innocent.
Okay.
They're all American.
Very good. All right. It's in the eye of the beholder. Go ahead.
Depends of what your target is.
You have the right opinion.
What I don't understand is, are you under the impression that the applause makes him right?
Yes.
Are you saying
are you
he's not-
demonstrating his argument? You're saying he won because of the popularity of his idea, so that makes him correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Allow me to respond. Most people in the Middle Ages argued that the Earth was at the center of the universe, and then this guy named Galileo said, no. And he was basically proven wrong because most people disagreed with him.
That was an opinion. That was fact.
Uh-huh.
They didn't know it was
Yeah,
bad.
no.
It was a fact.
Uh-huh.
It was an opinion based.
Why do you keep repeating yourself?
You keep saying,
I'm saying aha because you keep saying things.
This
Uh-huh.
is the center of argument.
Okay, so you are recognizing the bigger point here is, and that is, it's perception.
Earth is
We think they're wrong, they think we're wrong. One other thing to keep in mind is, in the American point of view, Al-Qaeda was not a legitimate fighting force. You were not fighting for a country, therefore, it isn't a war. You don't get just to create a group and then say, we're a group, we can declare war. I don't get to declare independence from the U.S. and then stab Will with scissors. And then when the cops come, say, hey, don't worry, I'm not part of the U.S. and what I just did was legal in my country. And the cops don't walk away like, oh, good point.
I'm an emancipated
It's
citizen.
not growth.
Okay, we're done.
You're lost
Thank
on
you.
fire.
You can hang out for a couple minutes.
like, you know,
You can't justify section.
they can.
How does that the message you try to convey in all